Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of my intro video to my new video series, Getting Over Social Anxiety. And with this video, I want to take the time to explain what is actually going on in our brain. And we have neurons in our brain that are triggered during events and actions to fire, and these neurons travel down neural pathways in the brain. I'm not going to get really technical here, but I just kind of want to explain the basics. So now these neural pathways have been ingrained in our minds, been reinforced basically by our actions, by our thinking. And so us with social anxiety have these neural pathways that lead us to feel anxious in social situations. And I'm going to use an example here. Let's use public speaking, giving presentations as an example. So sometime in our past, those of us that have serious anxiety when it comes to public speaking have had to give a presentation of some sort in the past, and something happened that triggered in our mind that presentations are bad, they're scary. I have a lot of anxiety when giving presentations. I don't want to give presentations anymore. So after a while, more and more neurons start gathering together and firing together, and they all kind of wire together and travel down this neural pathway that leads us to feel anxious and to feel fear about giving presentations, whenever we have to, do public speaking. Or sometimes the association can be so, the negative association with giving presentations can be so strong that we just get anxiety thinking about having to give a presentation. So now what happens here is that after that, scary event that happened in our past, we've basically reinforced that presentations, public speaking is scary. Well, more and more neurons are gathering and they're firing together, and more traveling down this neural pathway, which, eventually becomes so ingrained, so deeply ingrained that we feel intense anxiety because this belief about that presentations are scary has been so reinforced by us. We've had this negative self-talk over and over again that, I hate presentations are scary. So now this neural pathway is so deeply ingrained that whenever we're put in the position to, have to give a presentation or, do public speaking, or even sometimes if it's so deeply ingrained that we, just think about, public speaking or having to give a presentation. Like if we see someone on TV going up and giving a speech, we could even feel the anxiety even though it's not us up there giving the speech. And that's because that neural pathway is just it's been so reinforced, that we feel anxiety even when we're not in a situation to have to, do public speaking. So now, scientists that have studied the brain have discovered that the brain is malleable, it's plastic. You might have heard the term neuroplasticity. This is a welcome discovery for us because, it once was thought that our brain was concrete, our mind was concrete, like there's no way that things could be changed. We just felt like this was the way we think was permanent. However, now, since scientists that have studied the brain have discovered that the brain can change, we can change our thinking and even the way we feel about things. And the way we do that is through CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And I just want to kind of use an analogy here to basically illustrate how you can change your thinking. Okay, so let's use the analogy of a train going down a train track, a set of train tracks. there's this one set of train tracks that goes all the way down this long straight direction that leads you to negative town. Now, you know, I'm going to compare that set of train tracks to a neural pathway in the brain. Now, we've traveled, those of us that are scared, you know, have anxiety when it comes to public speaking, have traveled down those train tracks, you know, feeling fear and anxious about presentations and public speaking, giving speeches, etc. We've gone down that set of train tracks so many times that that's just, you know, the path that we think is always has to be traveled. Well, we can change our thinking by interfering with that neural pathway in the brain. We can interfere with the neurons that travel down that neural pathway, that is. However, to do that, you have to change your thinking gradually, okay? Now back to the analogy of the train. To change the direction of a train, you can't just have the train do a 180, like a U-turn. You know, if it's going down this direction, down to negative town, you can't just have it, you know, do a U-turn and then go the opposite direction, right? And that's not realistic. Like, a train can't just turn around and go back the opposite direction on the same set of tracks. And this goes back to my intro video, part 1, where I was saying that the brain just can't go from a strong negative belief and jump to a strong positive belief in a short, you know, amount of time. It's impossible. And so I'm using this train to kind of support that, this train analogy, that you can't just flip a train and have it go the, you know, positive direction. Now, no, like, to get a train to change directions, what you have to do is have it change tracks. And to do that, you run interference by flipping the switch, okay, that's on the side of the tracks, and then you flip the switch, and then, you know, another set of tracks might be curving to the right, and so when you flip that switch, the train, instead of going straight down this direction, now curves and goes this direction, okay? And so that's kind of similar to what we want to do with our thinking. Notice that the train now is going kind of this way, it's curving to the right, it's not doing a 180, but it is headed in another direction. So that's what we want to do with our thinking. We want to gradually change our thinking by using statements that we tell ourselves on a daily basis that, oh, you know, maybe presentations aren't as scary as I used to think they were. I know I used to struggle and be afraid with public speaking. I know I used to have a lot of anxiety when it comes to public speaking. I know I used to be really afraid of public speaking. This is correct, but maybe public speaking isn't as bad as I'm making it out to be. So you see what I'm doing here is I'm kind of opening my mind a little bit. And what this does is, because it's not just such a 180-degree turn, it's not such a huge leap in the other direction, the brain is more open to it. And what you're actually doing is you're interfering with the neurons that are traveling down this neural pathway. So these neurons now start to kind of fire in this direction down another neural pathway. And eventually, as you keep re-emphasizing this and keep reinforcing this new neural pathway, this more healthier and rational neural pathway that's kind of saying, you know, maybe presentations aren't that bad after all. Maybe, you know, they're not as scary as I made them out to be. Or give, you know, public speaking in general, maybe it's not as scary as I once thought. So the more you reinforce this, and I keep doing this, but I'm just trying to illustrate a point. The more you reinforce this new neural pathway, the more that these neurons that were traveling in this direction are now going to start grouping together and travel down this new neural pathway. And of course, once that happens, since the neurons that were once gathered on this neural pathway are now headed in down this neural pathway, that means that this old neural pathway that leads to anxiety is going to start becoming, you know, it's going to start wearing out, less neurons are going to start traveling, and that means that our anxiety is going to decrease when it comes to public speaking. It does take time and it does take repetition, but it does work if you know, stay committed to it. And again, I strongly urge that you seek out a legitimate cognitive behavioral therapy program, because CBT is what really changes your thinking. But the more that you do this, reinforce this new, healthier neural pathway, the more this old one wears out, and the less anxiety we feel in general about public speaking. So then eventually, this new neural pathway will start to, as it branches off, it'll ultimately go in a better direction, and then, it'll go away from anxiety, and we'll feel less anxiety about, the example I used, public speaking. And eventually, we'll become more okay with public speaking in general. So that's what I wanted to take the time to discuss in this video. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a link to an article from time.com that talks about the rewiring of the brain and how we can change our thinking in our brain. And it also takes a look at former research that supports this. And you probably heard this saying, the neurons that fire together wire together. And that's what this kind of article discusses. And that's what I was kind of, briefly explaining using my analogy here, that these old neurons that were grouped and were firing together down this old neural pathway to negative town, once they're broken up and we run interference and they start traveling down this new neural pathway, well, the more this new neural pathway gets reinforced by us, the more the neurons start to group together and fire down this neural pathway, which leads us to feel less anxiety about public speaking. So, alright guys, that's it for me in this video. I hope you found it helpful and informative. Okay, and the next video that I'm going to upload is going to be part 3, the final part of my intro video. And it's going to be me sharing my story about, when I had social anxiety, when it was at its strongest, when it was at its most intense, and what I did to, like I said, to change my neural pathways, to change my thinking, which ultimately led to me changing my behaviors as well, which is the goal. This is our goal, what we want to do, because the more we change our thinking and behaviors, the more we can live the kind of life that we want to. All right, everybody, thank you for watching. I'll talk to you later.